Goodbye. Goodbye. Yeah.
Deadly fighting has resumed in Gaza after the brief 7-day truce ended on Friday. Hamas says at least 178 people are already dead since the ceasefire ended. Both sides have traded blames for breaching the truce terms. The United States has backed Israeli arguments that Hamas is responsible for ending the pause. It has blamed Hamas for its failure to produce the list of hostages that could have helped a further extension in truce. Meanwhile, Hamas has accused both Israel and the US.
يعني احنا نرجع الفشل للطرفين الاسرائيلي والامريكي. الطرف الاسرائيلي يوم امس بالليل كان واضح انه هو يريد العوده الى القتال. جرى طرح اكثر من فكره من قبل الوسطاء. نحن تجاوبنا مع 3 افكار منها، ورغم ذلك الاسرائيلي كان يقول لا 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 في كل مره.
Israel has vowed to carry on with achieving its goals in Gaza. Country's defense minister told his airmen that Hamas only understands force and they will continue and strike until Hamas is eliminated.
כפי שאמרתי מהיום הראשון, אני חוזר ואומר עכשיו, ארגון החמאס מבין רק כוח. אנחנו נמשיך ונכה אותו עד שנשיג את מטרות המלחמה. פירוק ארגון החמאס, שלילת יכולותיו הצבאיות והחזרתם של החטופים אל ביתם.
Israel has released videos showing its resumed operations in Gaza. It says it struck operational command centers in the enclave, as well as underground sites and a military compound since the truce ended. It also said to have eliminated multiple terrorist cells throughout Gaza. Now, parts of Gaza's southern city, Khan Yunis, have come under intensive bombardment as the deadline lapsed. Several had to be rushed to hospitals as they were injured in the strikes. Meanwhile, Hamas has released video to show launch of drone towards Israeli army tanks in Gaza. Sirens and explosions were heard in Israel overnight as rockets were launched from the Gaza Strip. Now, fighting has also resumed on Israel-Lebanon border. Israeli army released a video to show army airstrikes and artillery fire targeting Hezbollah in Lebanon. And as per Lebanese state media, Israeli shelling killed 3 people in South Lebanon after the truce ended. Israel has confirmed in the meanwhile that 6 of Hamas hostages are now dead. Army has yet not verified the death of the youngest hostage taken by Hamas, who's a 10-month-old baby, and also his family. Hamas had claimed that the family was killed in Israeli strikes. Now, talking about the aid situation in Gaza, the White House says it believed Israel will allow humanitarian aid trucks to enter Gaza, but the number of deliveries will likely be reduced significantly. UN, meanwhile, says that humanitarian aid delivery to Gaza is unknown after the restart of fighting.
It's kind of a unknown. Even before this pause, we were able to get aid in, to do whatever we can, but it just, when fighting is going on, it makes it that much more complicated, challenging, and most importantly, dangerous for those delivering the aid and receiving the aid.
Now, to get you more details on what the collapse of the truce may mean, we are being joined by Edward P. Joseph, who's a senior fellow at the Johns Hopkins University and a foreign policy analyst. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Welcome to the broadcast, Mr. Joseph.
Good to be with you.
I'll begin with the renewed fighting in Gaza that has stretched into a second day on Saturday, and after talks extended, a week-old truce with Hamas collapsed. And what happens next?
Well, we see that Secretary of State Antony Blinken is doing his best to try to ensure that the situation does not revert to what we saw before. He did 2 things that was very important today in Israel. Number one, he made it very clear, as your introductory package showed, that Hamas is to blame singularly for the breakdown of the humanitarian pause. And he noted the terrorist attack in Jerusalem that killed 3 Israelis and stated that Hamas already had not fulfilled the agreed terms for the humanitarian pause, in addition to firing rockets before the pause had even ended. So he made that very clear. At the same time, he also made it clear to the Israelis that they have to do much better in terms of sustaining their operations, which the United States still backs. There's not any difference about that. The U.S. supports the intent to destroy Hamas and get rid of this virulent actor in Gaza. But according to Antony Blinken, he states, I made it clear that the amount of civilian casualties we had in the north can't repeat itself in the south. That is when Israel turns its attention, the military operation, to the south. And from the Israeli side, the indicators are that they understand that. And a senior military official in Israel indicated that the operation would be relying more on ground operations than it would on air, and that this would reduce civilian casualties. Please.
And Mr. Joseph, Qatar now says that it will persist in seeking a renewed agreement, but warned that the resumption of hostilities is complicating matters. Now, what do you think this renewed agreement would look like, if at all it comes into the picture?
It's hard to understand what the Qataris exactly have in mind. What they presumably want to do is to try to resurrect the terms that led to the initial hostage release, but that's very difficult here because, again, as Secretary of State Blinken made it unequivocally clear, it was Hamas that broke the terms. So from the Israeli side, there's already very clear that there's a breakdown here and a clear demonstration of what Hamas's intentions are. And the wider point here, Aditi, that I think people don't understand is the unity within Israel to, at this time, even despite serious concerns and even opposition to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And much of this, of course, stretches back to October 7th, which, of course, has been lost in the minds of so many protesters around the world who are, of course, understandably concerned about the death toll on Palestinians, including women and, above all, children. So that's what's been lost here. And what I would do, Aditi, as we don't have time, is simply turn your viewers' attention to the Twitter profile of a former U.S. Army officer, Alex Plitzas, who witnessed the video. This is a battle-hardened expert who has witnessed ISIS videos, Alex Plitzas, P-L-I-T-S-A-S, who saw yesterday the Hamas's own videos of what it did on October 7th. And Alex Plitzas, states that I can tell you unequivocally, having seen ISIS videos, that what I saw by Hamas was worse than the ISIS videos I've had to review in the course of my duties. And he goes on, Alex Plitzas, P-L-I-T-S-A-S, to say one of the more chilling and vile aspects of this Hamas attack that differs from videos I've seen of both al-Qaeda and ISIS atrocities is the maniacal laughter and the joy that the terrorists expressed while torturing and murdering unarmed civilians, to include women and small children. So see, this is what has been lost here in of course, the discussion of the understandable of the terrible death toll on Palestinian civilians, is that Hamas is not interested in liberation. It is interested in annihilation. And the United States understands that. Arab neighbors of Israel understand that. But it is the challenge for Israel to continue this military operation while minimizing the terrible toll that has been inflicted on Palestinian civilians, above all children. Please.
Mr. Joseph, speaking of challenges and complications, I would like to shift your attention now to the reports that have come in that Yemen's Houthi rebels had threatened to escalate their attacks while the ceasefire was on against Israel if ceasefire ends. And now there have been a lot of talks and incidents that point towards the war possibly turning into a multi-front war for Israel, and also the latest fighting on the Israel-Lebanon border that has resumed. Now, do you think the spillover is in the vicinity?
I think it's always a possibility. We know that. For the moment, we see that Hezbollah, which is the primary actor, not the Houthis in Yemen, they are already demonstrated, did a demonstration act by seizing a British vessel in the Red Sea. So they already demonstrated their intent to try to be part of the overall operation. But it is really Hezbollah that is the main actor. That's the party that has serious missilery, completely backed by Iran, which has projects its destabilizing influence in the Middle East through proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah. And so far, Hezbollah has backed off. Its leader, Nasrallah, has said that, indicated when he gave a big address, that they would not take this opportunity now to join in on behalf of Hamas. So they backed off. And the reason they backed off, Aditi, is because they're afraid that they will be pulverized by Israeli military if they get into an engagement and earnest conflict, direct conflict with Israel. And that will put them at disadvantage in Lebanon, where, of course, they are despised by other factions within Lebanon. So that's, for the moment, Iran and its proxy Hezbollah have been cautious about getting into a frontal conflict with Israel. Please.
Mr. Joseph, thank you for joining us and giving us all those insights. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
And also the significant development, Israel has communicated its intentions to the Arab states to establish a buffer zone along the Palestinian side of the Gaza border. This move is reportedly aimed at preventing future attacks as part of a post-war proposal. Now, citing the Egyptian and the regional sources, a Reuters report has now revealed that Israel has shared its plans with the Arab states. This includes Egypt, Jordan and the United Arab Emirates. Moreover, Saudi Arabia has also been informed, despite not having any diplomatic ties officially with Israel. Even non-Arab Turkey has received the information about the proposed buffer zone where the Israelis want to push out the Palestinian people into. In response, none of the Arab nations have expressed any willingness to administer Gaza in any way in the future. There haven't been any official comments from these nations. Instead, most of them have in fact condemned Israel's offensive that has resulted in a humanitarian catastrophe where thousands of people have been killed, most of them women and children, children so young that they do not even know that they're Palestinians, and that is why they're caught in this mind-numbing war. Now, a senior regional security official explained the reason, and let's in fact quote that here. Israel wants this buffer zone to prevent Hamas or any other militant faction from infiltrating or attacking Israel. Meanwhile, the American Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has held discussions with the West Asian nations regarding the future of Gaza, this even after Israel resumed its attacks on the Palestinian enclave. The discussion covered the present state of the ongoing war and the kind of measures that are being taken to deliver aid into the Gaza Strip. Previously, these nations have repealed US's attempts to discuss a post-Hamas future for Gaza, arguing over the American demand for an immediate ceasefire.
It is the third day since the truce collapsed. Bombing continues in Gaza. Both Israel and Hamas have ruled out negotiations for now, as bodies line up in the Palestinian enclave. Israel says it has pulled back mediators from Qatar, while Hamas says that another exchange of prisoners and hostages will only take place after a permanent ceasefire. As we speak, relentless airstrikes continue to hit Gaza. Flares and explosions lit up the Gaza skyline as fighting stretched to third day after the truce collapsed. Over 240 Palestinians have been killed as per Hamas since then. Rockets have also been fired from Gaza towards Israel. The Israeli officials say that hundreds and thousands were running for cover as sirens sound across central Israel on Saturday. Videos show how people are taking shelter for safety and Israel's Iron Dome defense system intercepting missiles above the city. The Israeli army has meanwhile released a video to show an alleged Hamas tunnel near a school in northern Gaza. The army said that the tunnel was 5 meters deep. They also released videos showing troops carrying out missions to neutralize infrastructure in what was said to be the area surrounding Jabalia in northern Gaza. While these are the scenes unfolding in Gaza, this is the scale of devastation both in southern and northern Gaza. The visuals on your screens right now are of Gaza City in the north and Khan Younis in the south. Both of these cities have come under intense bombings since the fighting resumed on Friday. Families can be seen fleeing their homes as they got struck by Israeli strikes. And this is the Al-Ahli hospital in Gaza City. It has often been targeted by the Israeli forces since the beginning of the war. Dead bodies have been arriving here by truck, car and even horse-drawn cart. And what you see is the devastation in southern Gaza. After 2 months of war, civil order is up for a toss. People have now resorted to loot 8 trucks that have been arriving in the territory. People were seen climbing on top of trucks, transporting humanitarian supplies. As per the reports, only 2 fuel trucks and 58 trucks were able to enter Gaza on Saturday. Israel says it has pledged to allow humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. However, it has also urged civilians to evacuate to safe areas as it will continue hitting targets.
And so as soon as the fighting wraps up in northern Gaza, we will continue to destroy all of Hamas's terror infrastructure in Gaza so they can never again hurt our people. We've published an evacuation map, evacuation routes towards safe areas, and we're urging civilians to continue going to these areas, and we're committed to continuing to work with international agencies to ensure the continuation of humanitarian aid, of food, of water, of medicine and shelter to the people of the Gaza Strip.
While the attacks continue, Israel has started mulling post-war arrangements. Well, a senior advisor has told Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that the country will seek a security envelope with special zones that will prevent Hamas from being positioned on its border after the war in Gaza is over.
So we have spoken that in the framework of the post-conflict relationships, Israel will have to have a security envelope. We can never again allow terrorists to cross the border and butcher our people the way they did on October 7th. And we can't take our eye off the ball. And so in a post-conflict reality, a post-Hamas reality, Israel will maintain for the foreseeable future overall security control.
And from on this, we're now being joined by Ron Alado, who is a former U.S. military officer and former intelligence and operations officer. He's joining us live from Florida. Thanks very much for joining us on WION, Mr. Alado.
Thank you. Very glad to be here tonight.
Right, Mr. Alado. Now, with the renewed fighting stretching into a third day, there is a growing threat of Israeli ground operation in the southern strip. My question to you is that, is it possible to fight a war there and still protect the civilians?
It's very, very difficult. It's extremely difficult. We need to understand that Gaza in general has about 9,000 people per square kilometer. 9,000 people per square kilometer is a very high density of population. Plus the Hamas militants that are about 19,000 in the military wing of Hamas, they are surrounded by almost 2 million people. So you have 19,000 people, the Hamas militants mix it up with 2 million people in a high density area. So very, very unlikely that Israel will be able to minimize civilian casualties. And that is the main concern of the international community, of the European Union, of many, many countries around the world, of the Vatican, that the war against Hamas is creating a very high number, sad number of civilian casualties right now.
Yes, Mr. Alado, since the last 2 days, at least 240 Gazans have already lost their lives, and there is a growing pressure from Washington for Israel to use more caution as it shifts the focus towards southern strip that we were talking about here. But the bigger picture here, when the war started, was for the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have fled to southern Gaza, which is where the fighting is now focused. The question being that where do Gazans go now? Is there any place that is safe for them at the moment?
In Gaza, no place in Gaza. Gaza is a small place. The whole territory of Gaza is very small. They have no electricity. They have no gas. They have no infrastructure. They are very, very little food, very little drinkable water. They have no medicines. They have nothing, and they are under constant attack by the Air Force of Israel. So there is no place to go. Some wounded people, a very little number of people is being allowed into Egypt. But Egypt don't have the infrastructure nor the resources to receive large quantity of people from Gaza. Egypt is not an option, only for a few hundred of the most critically injured people, etc., but not for the 2 million people that live in Gaza. They are trapped. They have nowhere to go. They have nothing right now. They are suffering a very big, harsh conditions without food, electricity, without medicine, without care, and without infrastructure, and they are on danger right now.
Yes, Mr. Alado. Now, the IDF in the latest has released a video just a few hours back. It shows a tunnel shaft near a school in northern Gaza. You are a former military officer as well, and we have spoken about the tunnel system. How difficult is it at the moment for the Israeli military to fight there?
Well, Israelis have overwhelming superior firepower. That Israeli is one of the most powerful and technological advanced militaries in the area and in the whole world, honestly. Small, but very, very capable. And they have the capability of cutting Gaza by a land corridor, and they have the capability of using satellites and using what we call ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance to follow all the movement of the Hamas fighters. They have signal intelligence capabilities to track all the emails or all text messages, all phone calls, or radio calls, etc. So they are extremely capable to do to destroy Hamas with overwhelming power. The problem again is that those 19,000 Gazan people from Hamas are surrounded by 2 million unarmed civilians, and those are the ones in danger. And Israel, honestly, the military, many military experts around the world are saying that Israel, despite of what they say, they are not really putting a lot of care on a lot of precautions in minimizing civilian casualties. That's the sad reality.
But Mr. Aldo, now there's also growing call on Israel to precisely define their goal, from France to the United States of America, especially with the civilian casualties mounting. Can Israel actually precisely target its areas in southern Gaza while also reducing the civilian casualties at the moment?
Well, that is the key question. What are Netanyahu's, the Likud party, real intentions? What is the real objective? That is the big question that really nobody else knows but himself. But Netanyahu knows what his objectives are. The public objective that he's telling the press, that he's telling the media, is that he wants, obviously, revenge for the terrorist attacks, and he wants to destroy Hamas. That is the public objective. But people who knows the Likud party and people who knows the ultra-Orthodox religious parties that are part of Netanyahu's coalition, that we know that the real objective is not, or perhaps might not be that. The real objective perhaps will be to take control, permanent control of the whole Gaza area and destroy the peace process that the Labour Party did back in 2007 when they left the occupation of Gaza, and they destroy and they unoccupy the settlements, the Jewish settlements in Gaza. So perhaps what the Likud wants and the ultra-Orthodox parties want, that they are hardliners, is to use this as an excuse to have the final goal of taking full control, full occupation, permanent occupation of Gaza, just like it was before 2007.
Right, Mr. Alam, last question to you. With the for the families of the remaining hostages and the besieged Gazans, the fact that the truce has ended must have been a blow. What hope of any possible ceasefire? Because in the latest, Israel has recalled its negotiation team from Qatar.
Well, it's possible that there are more ceasefires in the future, but everything depends in what the United States of America, what Biden and the Biden administration tells Netanyahu to do. Netanyahu have very little. He cares very little about what the European Union said, what Spain said, or France says, or what Germany says, etc. He don't really care about the European Union at all. He only cares about what the Biden administration, what the United States of America tell him to do. So if the pressure, the international pressure mounts in the United States, mounts the internal, the left-wing party, the left-wing section of the Democratic Party, make a lot of pressure on Biden to stop the war for a few more days or for a few more weeks and make a ceasefire, then Biden is going to put Netanyahu on pressure. Biden is the only person in the whole world right now that can have or might have some kind of influence in what decisions Netanyahu does. Again, Netanyahu cares very little about what India says and very little about what the European Union says. He only cares about what Biden, about what the United States of America says right now.
Right, Mr. Aldo, but why is that?
Because the United States is the very big protector, the very big mentor, the very big defender of Israel. They give Israel billions of dollars every year in military aid. They give him political support. They give him military support. They give him protection in the United Nations. The permanent seat of the United States in the Security Council protects Israel. So Israel depends always, for the last 40 years, have been completely dependent, or for the 50 years, on the United States of America.
Right, Mr. Aldo. Thanks very much for joining us here on WION and sharing your insights with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And on to a continuous coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. In the latest, Israel and Hamas continue to trade fire. Both the sides have refused calls to extend the truce. Israel says it has pulled back mediators from Qatar, while Hamas says that another exchange of prisoners and hostages will only take place after permanent ceasefire. As we speak, relentless airstrikes continue to hit Gaza. Flares and explosions lit up the Gaza skyline as fighting stretched to the third day after the truce collapsed. At least 240 Palestinians have been killed as per Hamas since then. Rockets have also been fired from Gaza towards Israel. The Israeli officials say that hundreds and thousands were running for cover as sirens sound across central Israel on Saturday. Videos show how people are taking shelter for safety and Israel's Iron Dome defense system intercepting missiles above the city. Israeli army has meanwhile released video to show an alleged Hamas tunnel near a school in northern Gaza. The army said that the tunnel was 5 meters deep. They also released videos showing troops carrying out missions to neutralize infrastructure in what was said to be the area surrounding Jabalia in northern Gaza. While these are the scenes unfolding in Gaza, this is the scale of devastation both in southern and northern Gaza. The visuals on your screens are of Gaza City in the north and Khan Yunis in the south. Both of these cities have come under intense bombing since the fighting resumed. Well, families were seen fleeing their homes as they got struck by the Israeli strikes. And this is the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City. It has often been targeted by the Israeli forces since the beginning of the war. And dead bodies have been arriving here by truck, car, and even horse-drawn cart. What you see at the moment is the devastation in southern Gaza. After 2 months of war, civil order is up for a toss. People have now resorted to loot 8 trucks that have been arriving in the territory. People were seen climbing on top of trucks, transporting humanitarian supplies in Gaza. As per reports, only 2 fuel trucks and 58 trucks were able to enter Gaza on Saturday. Israel says it has pledged to allow humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. However, it has urged civilians to evacuate to safe areas as it will continue hitting the targets in Gaza.
And so as soon as the fighting wraps up in northern Gaza, we will continue to destroy all of Hamas's terror infrastructure in Gaza so they can never again hurt our people. We've published an evacuation map, evacuation routes towards safe areas, and we're urging civilians to continue going to these areas, and we're committed to continuing to work with international agencies to ensure the continuation of humanitarian aid, of food, of water, of medicine and shelter to the people of the Gaza Strip.
While the attacks continue, Israel has started mulling post-war arrangements. A senior advisor has told Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that the country will seek a security envelope with special zones that will prevent Hamas from being positioned on its border after the war in Gaza is over.
So we have spoken that in the framework of the post-conflict relationships, Israel will have to have a security envelope. We can never again allow terrorists to cross the border and butcher our people the way they did on October 7th. And we can't take our eye off the ball. And so in a post-conflict reality, a post-Hamas reality, Israel will maintain for the foreseeable future overall security control.
Now, the truce between Israel and Hamas has come to an end early this morning. And today happens to be day 56 of this grueling, bruising war in which over 15,000 innocent Palestinian civilians have been bombed to their deaths. And what has happened since this morning, ever since Israel resumed its campaign of relentless bombing again, is that 109 Palestinians have been killed. Many are said to be women and children. After 7 days of a tenuous peace, hospitals in Gaza are again witnessing the same vulnerable condition. There are waves of wounded who are being brought into the hospitals desperate for treatment, desperate to save those who are grievously wounded.
Medical teams could not bear the big number of patients that arrived to the hospitals of Gaza Strip as a result of pile-up of previous cases in the hospitals. Their departure to outside Gaza Strip is very slow. There are still hundreds of cases in the departments of all hospitals in Gaza Strip.
So as the war resumes, the question of course remains, have the mediators failed in extending the truce? And if they have failed, is Israel's intention to expand its ground offensive? As for the latest, the Israeli airstrikes have been reported across the enclave, including in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, which, remember, should have been a safe zone. The Israeli military has announced that it is dividing the entirety of the Gaza Strip into dozens of numbered blocks, and it has dropped leaflets onto Gaza with a QR code to a website with a map of all the areas and geolocating people within them. Israel knows the address and phone number of every resident in the Gaza Strip. Now, the innocent civilians are asking, after having gotten assurances and after having been repeatedly told to head to the south of Gaza, which was declared by the Israelis as a safe zone, why is the Israeli military now attacking them in a place that Israel had said was a safe zone?
We left from Al-Qara village to Khan Yunis, and all of a sudden, after the temporary truce, the Israelis came up with new orders telling us that people from Al-Qara, Habathan and Al-Fuza had to leave to Rafah. I mean from day one, from one place to another, from the north to the south, from the center, who knows where next. And there is no electricity, no water, no food, no good living conditions, and we are patient. And we are patient.
So even though the renewed offensive appears to be wide-ranging, what happens to the remaining hostages? What happens to those military personnel who had been abducted? Now, since the truce was announced, an extended Hamas member has freed at least about 110 captives, including 80 Israelis. In exchange, Israel has released about 240 Palestinian prisoners, including women and predominantly children, many of whom have been in Israeli prison for months without even charges being leveled against them. The prospect of Israel expanding its ground campaign southward has also heightened international anxiety, including in the White House, which has warned its close ally to moderate its military tactics to reduce civilian casualties and the depopulation that is being witnessed in the Gaza Strip.
In my meetings today with the Prime Minister and senior Israeli officials, I made clear that before Israel resumes major military operations, it must put in place humanitarian civilian protection plans that minimize further casualties of innocent Palestinians.
So with most Israelis supportive of a war that they see as essential to their own security, Netanyahu has always said that the war will restart with full force after negotiations had run their course. Hence, after a week in which diplomacy was given a bit of priority, violence in the Gaza Strip is once again the dominant part of what is unfolding in the Gaza Strip, where the campaign of relentless bombing has again begun. The ceasefire, which had lasted for 7 days, hung by a thread and it snapped yesterday morning. And immediately afterwards, Israel began its campaign of relentless bombings, and just in the last 24 hours, at least about 178 people have been killed, and scores of others have been very grievously injured. Now, at this moment, it is difficult to predict as to where this war is headed. Now, the United States, as it has always done, has backed the Israeli side, and it has said that Hamas is responsible for ending the ceasefire. Now, the Americans have blamed Hamas for the failure to produce a list of hostages that could have helped a further extension in the truce. Hamas, on the other hand, has accused Israel and the United States of having walked out of this ceasefire and of having resorted to this campaign of relentless bombings that has worsened the humanitarian catastrophe in the Gaza Strip.
يعني احنا نرجع الفشل للطرفين الإسرائيلي والأمريكي. الطرف الإسرائيلي يوم أمس بالليل كان واضح أنه هو يريد العودة إلى القتال. جرى طرح أكثر من فكرة من قبل الوسطاء. نحن تجاوبنا مع 3 أفكار منها، ورغم ذلك الإسرائيلي كان يقول لا 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 في كل مرة.
Now, Israel is vowed to carry on with achieving its goals in the Gaza Strip, but how it wants to do it is still not clear, because the only strategy that Israel has been using is to drop bombs on the Gaza Strip, resulting in worsening the humanitarian catastrophe and suffering of the Palestinian people. And also, the country's defense minister Yoav Gallant has told his Air Force fighter pilots that Hamas only understands force, and Israel will continue to bomb the Gaza Strip.
כפי שאמרתי מהיום הראשון, אני חוזר ואומר עכשיו, ארגון החמאס מבין רק כוח. אנחנו נמשיך ונכה אותו עד שנשיג את מטרות המלחמה. פירוק ארגון החמאס, שלילת יכולותיו הצבאיות והחזרתם של החטופים אל ביתם.
Israel has released a video showing its resumed operations in the Gaza Strip. It says that it has struck operational command centers in the enclave and also underground sites and a military compound since the truce ended. Now, Israel also claims to have eliminated certain Hamas strongholds within the Gaza Strip. But remember, what is happening at this moment is that Israel is carrying out bombings in some of the most densely populated areas in the Gaza Strip. There's no place that is safe in Gaza, and especially southern Gaza, where Israel had been exhorting all Palestinians to flee to for safety, has now come in the crosswires of the Israelis. The large parts of Khan Yunis city have been bombed with a campaign of intense bombardment that Israel has resorted to since yesterday morning. The scores of people have been killed in Khan Yunis. Many of them were rushed to the hospitals as they were injured very grievously in the strikes. They had to be pulled out virtually by hand from underneath the rubble. Now, Hamas has also released videos to show the launch of a few of its rudimentary drones that it has towards the Israeli army tanks in the Gaza Strip. Silent explosions were heard in Israel as some of these crude rockets that Hamas has got were fired from the Gaza Strip. Now, fighting has also resumed on the Israel-Lebanon border as well. The Israeli army has released a video to show the Israelis carrying out air bombings on certain targets that they claim were Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. According to the Lebanese state media, the Israeli shelling has resulted in deaths of 3 civilians in southern Lebanon immediately after the truce ended. Now, Israel has confirmed that 6 of the Hamas hostages are now dead. This is something that the Israelis have now come forward and said. Now, the army has not yet verified the death of the youngest hostage taken by Hamas, who was a 10-month-old baby, and also his family. Now, remember, Hamas had said that these Israeli hostages had been hidden in one of its tunnels, and they died because Israelis bombed that tunnel. Now, talking about the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, the White House says that it believes that Israel will allow for humanitarian aid trucks to enter into Gaza, but the number of deliveries will be reduced significantly. The United Nations, meanwhile, has said that the humanitarian aid delivery to Gaza is an unknown after the restart of the fighting.
It's kind of a unknown. Even before this pause, we were able to get aid in, to do whatever we can, but it just, when fighting is going on, it makes it that much more complicated, challenging, and most importantly, dangerous for those delivering the aid and receiving the aid.
And also to give us more perspective in terms of what is happening at this moment at the Gaza Strip, we're being joined by Professor John Blaxland, who is an international security expert and a professor in intelligence studies and international security, and is joining us live on the broadcast here. Now, Professor Blaxland, it's been 24 hours now since the fighting has resumed. The ceasefire, which had gone on for about 7 days, came to an end. Now, Israel says that its intention is to try wipe out Hamas, but it is doing so by dropping bombs in some of the most densely populated neighborhoods anywhere in the world. It has sparked a humanitarian catastrophe which is being made worse at this moment at the Gaza Strip. Does Israel actually have a strategy in achieving the objective that it claims that it wants to?
Yeah, look, good to be with you, and it is a shocking situation. It's devilishly difficult. Of course, we need to remember that this is largely an information war. While what we're seeing on the screens is about death and destruction, the effect that I think the Hamas has always sought is for this to kind of paint Israel as the ogre, as the bully, as the perpetrator of the violence, trying to make people forget what happened on October the 7th, and to rally the cause. Let's not forget Hamas prior to October the 7th was being completely marginalized. Saudi Arabia was on the cusp of doing a deal with Israel. They were almost completely isolated except for support they were getting from Iran and some moral support from Turkey. So this has been a game changer for Hamas. They have been very happy to, well, they've been prepared to see Palestinians sacrificed essentially for the cause, while the Hamas themselves have been hidden away. The hospitals have been used as shields. The resumption of violence is a direct consequence of them not being prepared to give more captives up for exchange for Palestinian detainees in Israel.
Professor Blaxland, if I can just interject there, but Israel also has a choice in terms of how it goes after Hamas. You know, what is interesting is that